Is there anything that we shouldn't use our business credit for?
Simple and plain, anything that is not an ordinary or necessary business expense. And I'll explain why. Buying things that have no connection to your business, when it comes time for tax time to be around, and if you do have a bookkeeper or accountant and they're over here reviewing your finances, I see you sweating already. I see you rubbing your forehead. When tax time comes and your accountant is like, okay, well, what's this $500 you spent over here at King's Plaza? All right, hold on. Give me a second. What's this $250 that you spent at Zara? He's like, well, I was just I was investing in me. I wasn't invested in the.
You look good, you feel good, and you perform better. So when I'm fly, I'm gonna do better in business. So therefore, it's a business expense.
Do you need personal credit to get access to funding? Not necessarily, but if you want to get it in the fastest and largest way possible, there's no better way than making sure your personal credit is in place so that you can go out and do so.
Bottom line, your community doesn't have to only be the people you live around.
Facts.
Community is something that you're given sometimes, but community is also something that you can create because you are going out there and you are seeking something different than your norm, and that's genuinely okay. And if you ask me, you should really embrace both. So if you haven't looked for your community yet, you probably should go looking for them.
There you go.
What's going on, everyone? It's your favorite founder and host, Jerlisa Juju Fontaine. I'm a proud product manager turned digital media entrepreneur and community builder with a passion for all things business, innovation, productivity, and of course, digital health. I'm on a life mission to create a world where people can live healthier and financially fulfilling lives, all whilst doing the work that they love. So how does this podcast fit into that? Step into the world of the Very Necessary Decisions podcast, where I interview industry experts, thought leaders, and change makers on the very necessary decisions that they had to make for the sake of their accelerated business and career growth. We take deep dives into their innovative strategies, business models, and more. And don't worry, we aren't sticklers on this side. We make these conversations informative, yet fun and chill. Take a listen.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Very Necessary Decisions podcast. As you all already know, I bring on amazing guests to speak to you all, not just about themselves, but to educate you on the skills that you need in order for you to not only survive, but to thrive, all right? We don't just survive out here, we thrive out here. As you all know, I took a little break from the podcasting for a little bit. But with the most recent episodes, we've been very intentional about making sure that everybody who comes on has something to teach you. Not just, key, laugh. We're going to do that too, but there's a lot for you all to learn when it comes to building products, when it comes to marketing and branding your business and your products, when it comes to even finding new ways to make money outside of your 9-to-5 job. The reality is everybody doesn't want to start a company. Some people just really want to know, how can I make an additional income to supplement other things that I do in life, whether it's for fun, whether it's supplement your hobbies or whatever it is. But today is actually going to be a little different. And we've actually never had an episode about this topic at all. And I'm actually embarrassed. Because if you know me, you know I love talking about money and finances. And to not have brought on somebody to talk about anything other than business and product building and making revenue through that, why have I never brought on a credit specialist? Everybody, for the most part, most adults have a credit card. And if they don't have a credit card, they probably want one. Whether it's for good reasons or bad reasons, they do want one. Now, although I have a lot of advice that I can give, I cannot say that I am the go-to expert for credit. But you know what I do have? I have a friend. And that friend's on the call. And that friend, his name is Marvin. And you know what Marvin is? Marvin is indeed the credit specialist that you all should have been exposed to a very long time ago. But as my friend Drake said, even though y'all beefing with him, better late than never, all right? So with that being said, for this episode, it's going to be very much so locked in on two things. Credit is the umbrella topic, but we're talking about personal credit, but mostly business credit. And the reason why we're going to talk about personal credit is because a lot of people actually have a lot of questions on, does business credit impact my personal credit? Or do I need good personal credit to get business credit? Like, how do the two interconnect? And I don't have the answers. Marvin does. So with that being said, Marvin, my dear friend, please let them know, who are you? You're glowing, you're glistening, you're giving godlike energy right now. Who the hell are you, Marvin?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for a very welcoming introduction. I want to say thank you to you for allowing me on your platform. I'm very excited to be able to connect with you, connect with your audience, and provide value. Now, that being said, for those who aren't familiar, my name is Marvin Francois. So I'm the owner and founder of TakeOff Financial LLC. I'm also the owner and host of the Marvin Francois Show, your number one source for all things business, finance, and investing. But before all of those things, I am a credit specialist, and pretty much I specialize in helping entrepreneurs access and leverage business funding to grow and scale profitable businesses. To give a little bit of a backstory, I wasn't always in the financial literacy space. Juju kind of knows this, but for those who don't know, prior to getting into the finance space, I did have a background in the world of entertainment, right? So I was actually an aspiring stand-up comedian at one point in time, did that for about 3 years. And then 2020 came around, which, as we all know, was the COVID era. And going into 2020, I was doing okay in the world of stand-up comedy. But even though, my career was saying one thing, bank account was saying something entirely different, right? So that 2020 was the first year where I had to kind of just take a second to take a step back and say, all right, cool. This is where I'm at. World shut down. Where do we go from here? And at that moment in time, I had made the executive decision to take a step away from the world of stand-up and then transition into the world of business. So all throughout 2020, I tried investing in real estate. I tried cryptocurrency, stocks, all these different things. None of them was a really good fit for me until I found out about the world of credit. Now, what's great about credit was, coming from the background I come from as a Haitian man, in our culture, finance and credit is not really a topic of discussion. The only time we talk about finances is, all right, make money, save it, and then go to work until you're 65 and retire. But the world of credit allowed me to realize that money was so much more than that, right? Credit is leverage. It's having the power to establish relationships with banks and lenders to be able to put yourself in a position where you can access $50,000, not in a matter of weeks, not a matter of months, but in a matter of days, if you're understanding and clear about what are the tips, tricks, and strategies you can use to get there. And once I got that information in my mind, I was like, man, there's no way this is true. Until I got the information and leveraged it, and I was helping people who were close to me get access to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 and more, and said, okay, I think I got something here. And then from there, I pretty much took that information, started creating content around it. And fast forward several years later, not only have I been able to build a media empire around my knowledge of credit and business funding, but I've also been able to create a company where I've been able to serve tens of thousands of people all across the country, either restore their credit or get access to funding so that they can build successful businesses. So that's a pretty much a rough breakdown of who I am and why I'm excited to get on here and give you guys a game.
First of all, I love that story a lot because I think a couple of things kind of stand out to me, right? Well, first things first, we all understand what it is that you do and what you specialize in, and that's very important. I think that what you also squeezed in that you didn't really think too hard about was you kind of expose people to how they can develop unique business models around their brands and their businesses, right? Like their core service is credit coaching, credit specialist, etc., right?
Right.
But you also are able to build out a media brand around this core service because you realize that you're one person. And although you can serve multiple clients because you kind of need to for your service-based
Right.
business, there are people who may not have the opportunity to speak to you and they don't know that they need you yet either, right? They don't know much about credit. So if you can build out this media platform that kind of serves as an educational resource to people who are thinking about credit but don't know too much about it, but you're reaffirming or reassuring what it is that's going through their minds, like it's cool that you're able to build a business model around that. So for everybody who's listening, sometimes you have to realize that while it's cool to have your service-based business or it's cool to have your product-based business, sometimes if you have the personality for it and you care to be the educator of that topic, you can
Yeah.
always build out a media brand so that your knowledge extends what it is that you're doing through your actual company. So
Fact.
I love that you mentioned that. On top of that, the career pivoting factor.
Right.
I'm really big on career pivoting. Most of us, especially from Caribbean culture, like I'm Dominican, he's Haitian, but a lot of us are told, like, go find that one thing that you want to do for the rest of your life
Right.
and marry it until you retire.
Yep.
And the goal for, if not all, most of us is to retire at some point, but is the goal to keep doing the same thing forever? I don't know if it needs to be that. So the fact that we're experiencing a generation of career pivoters where people are realizing I was doing something, maybe I enjoyed it, maybe I didn't, but something in my spirit or economically is calling for me to do something else, and that should be okay. And I think in your world, it worked out for you, right? I'm gonna tell you why it works for you. And for everybody who's listening, listen carefully. Marvin has a lot of personality. And to even be somebody, to be a stand-up comedian, you obviously need a lot of personality. But I
Mhm.
think the learning here, or the real true, I guess, educational experience here is because he has all this personality, but he has a lot of intelligence to share with the world, a lot of intellect to share with the world. People can not only just learn about credit from him, but they
Mhm.
get to like actually experiencing it in a way that's fun, serious when it needs to be, cool, hip, a vibe.
Yep.
Like he just brings something very unique to the world of credit. Like
Right.
it's not your typical Dame Ramsey financial literacy podcast. Like the energy is so different. And I reiterate that because a lot of us want to take our personalities and integrate it to something that maybe isn't always fun and sexy, but you feel like, am I making a fool of myself? Like,
Right.
should I keep it serious all the time and not try to combine the two? But
Mhm.
Marvin does it well. Like when you see him speak, you know he knows what he's talking about, but at the same time, he's gonna do his little whatever it is that he does, and you're just happy to tune into that. So I say that to say that career pivoting is okay. It's
Mhm.
okay to integrate your personality and your humor and etc. into
Yep.
the serious work that you do, and forget the quotation marks, but the serious work that you do, that should actually be okay. And then
Mhm.
lastly, you can always diversify the way you build your business. It doesn't
Yep.
just have to be that product. It don't have to be just that service. It can be whatever else you think that you need to add on to your business to expose other people to the work that you do, but also the topic of the work that you do, which is credit, finance, whatever the case may be. So had to put that in there real quick because Marvin's just that
Appreciate
great. That blurb was
it.
amazing.
Thank you.
But we got to get into it because we got a lot to learn because
Let's
we
do it.
only have Marvin for a very specific amount of time.
Mhm.
And I got to squeeze him for
Let's go.
everything that he's got. So, with that being said, did you mention you from Brooklyn?
Born and raised.
All right, just making sure. We can't miss that part. My New York City family.
You understand?
Um, but I mentioned that because to build a media-based business or a
Mhm.
service and media-based business,
Right.
you need a community of people to believe in you and to support you as an individual, but to
Mhm.
support the topic that you talk about.
Mhm.
Talk to me about growing up in Brooklyn, building community, and that kind of, I guess, transcribing itself into the work that you're doing online.
So it's funny you say that because a large part of me getting to where I got to came from me building community outside of Brooklyn. So like to get more specific, I didn't just grow up in Brooklyn, but I'm originally from Canarsie, and I didn't see a lot of example as I started navigating my way in the world of credit and finance. I didn't really see a lot of examples that I was able to pull from to add on to or to connect with to help me build this thing even better and faster than how I was already doing it. The main lever that I had to pull and towards me getting around the right information, the right resources, and the right people to get to where I'm at now was getting in mentorship groups that I was finding online. And I was connecting with people that lived in Vegas, people that lived in Texas, people that lived in Carolina, all across the country. And in some cases, even all across the world, that was either where I wanted to be or on the same path that I was on. And then from there, that helped me to go ahead and accelerate the process of me becoming this credit specialist that I am way faster.
Yeah.
So as a result, what I did from there was after I got connected to those people that had the information and had the resources I was looking for, and I learned it, then I took it and brought it back to my people in my community. Right. Like up until this point, I've been fortunate enough to speak at churches, speak at public events within Brooklyn and in New York to educate people that look like me, walk like me, and talk like me, but just weren't fortunate enough to get the information that I was able to get because I was able to invest in, all these high level masterminds and mentorships to get the information. So even though I wasn't in an environment that was conducive to where I wanted to be, once I found out where that environment was and inserted myself in there, I was very intentional about making sure I took that information and brought it back to my people. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, that absolutely answered it. It answered it in many different ways, right? I think that to your point, like when I asked the question, my assumption is that was just the only community, right? It was only the Brooklyn community. And that's a
Right.
very false assumption, right? The reality is we're very fortunate to have this thing called the internet.
Facts.
And it means that you are not limited to having relationships with people who are only, I guess, in proximity to you geographically. You are now
Mhm.
able to join these mastermind groups and join these online groups and build relationships with people in states and cities you never thought you would tap into. But that's the cool
Yep.
thing about two things: having access to the internet, but also being somebody who's very intentional
Mhm.
about learning something new and meeting new people in the process of it. So you very much so answered it. If everybody who's listening, to put that in context for you, Bottom line, your community doesn't have to only be the people you live around.
Facts.
Community is something that you're given sometimes, but community is also something that you can create because you are going out there and you are seeking something different than your norm, and that's genuinely okay. And if you ask me, you should really embrace both.
Let's
So if
go.
you haven't looked for your community yet, you probably should go looking for them.
There you go.
Um, but now that we got that out the way, I want to go right into it. Marvin,
Let's
credit,
do it. Let's do it.
personal credit to
Mm-hmm.
business credit.
Mm-hmm.
Myth or fact? Do you need good personal credit to get business credit?
The golden question. Now we're getting into even more fun territory. Do you need good personal credit to get business credit? Absolutely, you do. So, to provide some context, there are going to be individuals in the finance space who may tell you otherwise, whether it's for clickbait or whether it's because of something else. So to kind of break it down a bit more, in the world of credit, especially when we're talking about business credit, there's two ways that you can get access to business credit. There's something called personal guarantee funding and non-personal guarantee funding. So most people who tell you that you can get access to business funding without having to have personal credit are usually speaking about going the non-personal guarantee route. And pretty much what that is instead of you using your personal credit report that's connected to your social security number, you're using your business in and of itself to go out and get access to capital. The problem with that approach is that while you can get access to funding, number one, the funding products that you're able to get access to are not as robust as the business credit products you're able to get access to on the personal guarantee side. And number two, they're also typically those business credit products are normally what we call corporate cards. So corporate cards are lines of credit that you can borrow, but you can only borrow the money for a certain set period of time before you have to pay it back in full. Right. And if you're a new or aspiring business owner and you're looking to get access to 25,000 in funding, that's probably not funding that you're looking to pay back right away. You need time to invest the money and then go ahead and get it back. The reason why it's so important for you to have good personal credit is because it literally streamlines the entire process of you getting access to business funding, right? When you walk into a bank and you are able to show them that you yourself have already established great relationships personally with banks and lenders before you go to them and ask for funding, it makes the ability for you to get funding not only faster, but also allows you to get access to capital in much larger amounts than you would be if you were going the non-personal guarantee route. So to a certain degree, do you need personal credit to get access to funding? Not necessarily, but if you want to get it in the fastest and largest way possible, there's no better way than making sure your personal credit is in place so that you can go out and do so.
Fire answer. I have a follow up to that.
Just do it.
And we'll talk more about this a little later, but I want to use myself as an example. Is when you say a more robust credit line or more robust business credit, whatever it is, funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is would a solid goal be to have a credit line of like $50,000?
Okay, very interesting question. Your goal, so the goal that you have when it comes to getting access to funding is on a case by case basis, right?
Yeah.
And that actually ties into another thing that I also tell people too, because a lot of times you'll see people get on the internet. And it's like, I want 100,000 in funding, I want 150,000 in funding, or I want 25,000 from Chase, and then you ask them why, and
Yeah.
then their mind goes blank.
Yeah.
So the first step that you want to take before you even go out and get 25, 50, 75, whatever that number is figure out why you need the funding and what you
Mhm.
plan on using it for. And then once you figure out what your funding goals is, what I call them are, then you're able to reverse engineer from there. So
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. Let's say you are someone that's looking to get access to business funding because you want to start investing in real estate. The
Mhm.
first thing I'll tell you is, okay, great. That more than likely means that when it comes to the business credit products you're looking for, you probably want funding products that are going to give you longer 0% intro APR periods. Why? Because in real estate, it takes time for you to invest the money and get a return on that money. And the
Mhm.
longer the 0% intro APR period that you have, the longer amount of time that you have to borrow that money without having to pay interest on it.
Mhm.
Versus if you come to me as a business owner, you're like, hey, I don't really have any significant investments that I want to make right now. I just want to be able to get rewarded for the money that I'm spending on a day-to-day business in my business anyway. Then
Yeah.
I would tell you to look into certain business card products that maybe don't have longer 0% intro APR period, but they have better cashback reward bonuses, or maybe they offer better perks for spend. Like I'll give you an example. There's a business credit card called the MX Gold. If you're a business owner that spends a lot on paid advertising, that's a great business credit product for you to have because you're now able to get 4 times the rewards on the money that you're spending every single day on paid marketing anyways, right? So it's all about getting very clear on what your goals are. And then from there, once you're clear on what those goals are, you'll be able to say, okay, do I need 25,000 in funding or do I really only need 10 to 15? Do I need 35 to 50? And of this amount of funding that I'm looking for, what are the best funding products that fit where it is that I'm trying to go in my business with these respective products.
Okay, that was fire. Okay, so let's use Juju as a case study. Ready?
Let's do
Okay,
it.
because y'all know I'm an open book.
Let's go.
I applied for a business credit card, honestly, at a time where I don't really think that I needed it, but I knew I would need it.
Okay.
So I want to say I got my business credit card. It just sounds right. In April of 2022. That sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it during that time because I knew that sometime within the next year or 2 years, I'm going to grow Hugh Capital into something, or I'm going to restart it or
Right.
rebrand it as no longer a podcast, but an actual events company first, then media company, then tech company.
Okay.
So let me get this out the way. And I got the Chase Inc. credit card.
Okay.
Cool. So that's number one. Number
Dope.
two, my credit score at the time was, I want to say, anywhere between a 750 to 767.
Okay.
And I received a credit line of $50,000.
Okay.
Now, in terms
Very
of the
fire.
why, excuse me?
I said very fire, but go ahead.
You feel me? I'm like, ah!
Yeah.
But I realized, okay, now that the first goal is done, right, which was me just getting it to get it out the way because I knew I would need it.
Right.
Now that I do need it, to your point, my question was, okay, why do I know I need it now? I knew I would need it, but why now? And I knew that now was because Hugh Capital, being a mixture of a couple of things between throwing events, but also being tech is something that's very much so burn through money now, make money a lot later.
Yeah.
But to also subsidize some of that, which works out favorably because we are community first. Throwing events is community first, but we get to make some money through events. So
Right.
I realized that, okay, we don't throw events large enough consistently to make a lot of money every month. What
Mhm.
really ends up happening is you throw these large events every here and there, and because you do it so grand, so big, it makes a lot at once. So in order for me to not go broke in the process of trying to pay for things that are building my company and my platform, I am using this credit line because I realize that I don't have a consistent income through my business every single month. So I'll be using the credit card to pay for certain expenses, still pay what I got to pay off every month. But when I get that big gig or that big event or that big money in bulk, I can pay a lot of it off in bulk. So
Okay.
that's just my situation. Dissect that. Is that an appropriate thing? Did I win? Did I lose? Am I handling my credit irresponsibly? What's going on in the world of Juju?
So to make a long story short, you had, and this is an arbitrary number. These we cannot confirm or deny if well, unless you want to. Do you actually They actually gave you 50,000.
Oh yeah, I wasn't joking. I was serious. That's my actual real life situation. Oh, I wasn't making any of that.
Oh, this is real. Well, first off, the fact that you got 50,
yeah, like I'm an
your
actual
first, your
case
first
study.
wait, no, your first time getting funding, you got 50,000 from Chase.
Oh yeah, credit line of 50,000. Yeah.
God bless you, sister. That's incredible.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm saying. Like, use me as an example. I'm very much so being serious
So
right
you
now.
got access to 50,000 at a time when you didn't need it, but you knew you would need it later on down the line. Now your business is in a situation where you want to start you have already started using the 50,000. You have already started using the 50,000 to cover a lot of the expenses you have in the business, but that 50,000 that you've used to cover the expenses in the business, it is only because what you're using to cover it for, you don't necessarily have the income yet to go ahead and cover it yourself. So essentially, got you. Okay, cool. Have you used your credit irresponsibly? Not necessarily, right? You leverage business credit to do what most business owners would do, which is to make an investment into your business. What I would say is, and this is kind of where financial just strategy and preparation comes a lot more into it. Number one, the first thing that I would have told you was, I don't know the 0% APR period when it comes to the Chase Inc. card, but I think that in a situation where if you had probably waited right till when you were going to make the investment, let's say that card had a 0% period for like 12 months and you got it a year ago and you just started using it today. Well, now that period is done. And let's say you put $10,000 on that card. Now you're paying interest every single month on that card, right? Versus if you had waited right till when you were about to make the investment, now you would have been able to have that 10,000 just sit on there and paid the minimum payments until you were in a position to now go ahead and pay it back. But that's water under the bridge. I guess the only other thing that I would say is it's only irresponsible if you didn't already have a plan prior to as to, okay, worst case scenario, if I'm not able to pay this money back by X amount of time, what are my options to make sure that this debt gets taken care of? Because I think the biggest mistake that people make is they take out funding, they go spend it willy-nilly, and then they try and figure out, okay, what is the plan to pay back after? Like at the end of the day, this is a loan. right? And this is why I think a lot of people find themselves in situations where they could be compromised or ultimately mess their credit up because they spend first and then ask questions later, or invest, in your case, business funding first and then ask questions later. The only way you would have made an irresponsible decision, once again, is if you aren't clear about how you're going to go ahead and pay those funds back, or what Hugh Capital needs to do to get to a point where it can start making a certain amount of monthly cash flow on a month-to-month basis to start incrementally paying that debt down. But aside from that, everything else sounds pretty straightforward. It sounds like you're doing okay, just as long as you were responsible with how you're going to pay that money back. That's all.
I'm going to tell you all why Marvin is the right one to listen to. Because I gave him a bait and I want to see if he was going to take it. And I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
So, to your point, I don't think that I did anything wrong. To your point, I think that I had my plan, it's going accordingly, so on and so forth. But I don't really believe in regrets. But if there was one thing that I could do different, and I was hoping you would call it out, and you absolutely did, was at the time, it just sounded smart to just get it in advance in case my credit score dropped for whatever the reason is.
Right.
But I did indeed miss out on one of the most important things that you could benefit from when it comes to business credit is that fixed period where you do have that 0% APR and et cetera. Like,
right.
by the time I started using it, that was long gone. Like, I never had the chance to benefit from that. And if I could do anything differently, I honestly genuinely would have waited until I actually knew I needed this card, because I would have been able to properly reap the benefits of what that card or that bank or whatever it is had to offer. And that's my only regret per se. So I'm happy you called that out, because that was the one thing I was going to say after you dissected my case was, if I could do anything differently, that's the primary thing that I would have done differently. And that's how you know he knows what he's talking about. Okay? No, you're welcome. You're welcome. But now that we got a sense of my situation, you kind of talked about this a little bit in your explanation towards my case. But when we talk about why, can you give us maybe 3 examples of why somebody needs this credit card? And the answer is not just they need business funding. It's what about their financial situation are they maybe going through as they're building a service-based business, a product-based business, a real estate business? What could be some whys for knowing that I need a business credit card?
Yeah. So a couple of different reasons for, and I slightly touched on a couple earlier, but I guess I can expand on it. So for one, if you are in a situation where your business is spending money, of course, and I'm sure you are if you're trying to grow your business, whether it be on payroll, whether it be on software and services, subscriptions, whatever it may be, but you're paying that money all through a debit account, you're not getting as much rewards on that spend as you could be if you had everyday business credit card products that were maintaining that spend and you were paying those cards down. Right. So once again, for example, if you're spending money on ads, why would you spend that money on a Chase business debit card when you could roll those same expenses over to an Amex Gold card to where you're able to get 4 times the reward points from money that you were going to spend anyways? Yeah. Right. So now, as a result of you doing so, not only are you getting rewarded, but you can now leverage those reward points to go ahead and invest in other parts of your business, to go ahead and cover a travel expense for somewhere you were getting ready to go to by way of a business trip or something else that you may have had going on. So that's one example. Another example is similar to Juju's situation. If you have gotten to a point, or you're getting ready to start a business, or you've gotten into a point in your business where you're getting ready to make a large investment, but you don't necessarily have the liquid to go ahead and make that investment, that's another great reason and why most people go ahead and get access to funding, right? For example, when I started my company, TakeOff Financial, we didn't necessarily have the liquid to go ahead and start it. So I invested $15,000 of funding that I got from Chase to invest in payroll, to invest in software and services and beyond. But similar to what I explained to Juju, before I got the money and before I spent a penny of that money, I had a clear 6 to 12 month plan on how I was going to make a certain amount of income back to make sure I could pay that money back, because I need Chase chasing me down for that money, right? I wanted to make sure that I was able to pay him back. Those are really the main 2 reasons why anyone would ever need to get access to funding, either because they want to maximize the spend they already have in their business, or because they have a large investment they're getting ready to make in their business that they either don't have enough liquid for, and they want to be able to buy themselves some time while they get a return on that investment to ultimately pay that card down. That
was perfect.
Appreciate it.
Because like I said, you did it better than I did. Like I said, I was just over here lollygagging, I know I'm gonna need this one day. I'm just not sure when that day is gonna be. And for all I know, I may lose my job. You know what I'm saying? I may I guess, not be able to pay my bills on time, and therefore my credit score may go down.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, I won't be able to get the car that I want. So at least it will be in my wallet waiting for me. But I'm not gonna lie, I really
Mm-hmm.
do wish that I benefited from that 1 year, but it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I like that you kept mentioning about Amex Gold, right? I could tell that
Yep.
that card is something that people probably should aspire to get when it comes to their credit journey, their business credit journey. I mentioned about myself personally using Chase, their in card. But are there like maybe I guess a top three or top five business credit cards that we should be looking into?
Oh, now this is where things start to get super fun. So let's do it, right?
Let's do it.
So the number one question that I always get that you just alluded to is, Marvin, what are the best business credit cards that I could apply for? What are the best banks? Where should I go to get access to business funding? I want to look at the camera when I'm saying this. The best place that you can go to get access to business funding are banks you already have a relationship with. If, of course, they offer business funding products. The name of the game when it comes to anything credit on the personal side and or on the business side all comes down to one thing: relationships, right? When you're going to a bank and you're leveraging your personal credit report to get access to funding, you're leveraging relationships you've already nurtured on the personal side with personal credit cards, secured loans, student loans, card notes, and beyond to get access to funding for your business, right? When you're going to banks that you already have a relationship with to get access to the capital because you've been put hundreds of dollars into an account or thousands of dollars into an account, you're leveraging that relationship as well, not only to get approved for the funding, but also to get access to more funding than you would be if you didn't have a relationship with them. So the first thing I would tell anybody who's watching this podcast, if you're trying to find the best banks for you to go to or the best cards to go to, the first place you want to start is saying, okay, what are all of the respective banks that I already have relationships with? Number one. Two, now that if I'm clear on what my funding goals are, do any of these banks that I have a relationship with offer business funding products that align with these funding goals? And three, and this is where I'll speak to a slightly different segment of the audience. If you're watching this and you're like, okay, well, Marv, either I don't have banks that I already have a relationship with, or the banks that I do have relationships with, they don't offer funding products that I like. Where can I go? Where should I look? I'm going to give you guys some help, right? So the best banks that you can go to, or the best strategy that you can put in place when it comes time for you to get access to funding, it's very important that you understand something called bank tiers. So there are actually tiers of banks, right? So there's tier one, tier two, tier three, and tier four. I won't get into the nitty gritty of each and every single one of them, but typically what most people do, and there's nothing wrong with it, is they normally go to like tier one banks like Chase, which is fine, right? Because Chase everyone knows Chase, right? They're very well established, biggest bank in the world, and they have a lot of great funding products. But if you're just starting out in your relationship with them, it's probably going to take you a sizable amount of time before you're able to get approved for funding or get access to the amount of funding you want. That's when tier two and tier three banks come in. So tier two banks are what we call regional banks. These are the little guys under big banks like Chase and Bank of America and so much more. And what's great about tier two banks, which are regional banks, is because they're in bank competition with banks like Chase, they actually have more lenient underwriting in place to where if you go and form relationships with those banks, not only are they going to give you access to funding, but they're going to give you access to even more funding. So one great example of a bank, right? We're in New York, so I'll give you a New York-based bank. One great tier two bank that people could look into, and it's not just based in New York, this is one of the states it's based in, is a bank called KeyBank. So a lot of people don't know about KeyBank, but KeyBank is a really great bank that'll give you access to up to $50,000 in funding with doing a soft pull on your Equifax report. What does that mean? Whenever you apply for funding, whatever bank that you're going for, especially if you're using your personal credit report, they're going to leave an inquiry on your personal credit report to show that they looked at that report to determine if they're going to approve you for whatever business funding product you apply for. KeyBank isn't going to leave an inquiry on your report. They're going to look at your Equifax report, but they won't leave an inquiry on there, which is actually helpful because the less inquiries you have on your personal credit report, the better your personal credit looks when it's time to get access to funding. So those are tier two banks. And then the other tier of banks that people should also look into as well are tier three, which is credit unions. So a lot of people sleep on credit unions, but this is also another great financial institution that you can leverage when it comes time to get access to funding, because similar to tier two, they're non-for-profit organizations that are very, very friendly when it comes to giving out funding, right? So some examples of some credit unions are Banner Federal Credit Union, Navy Federal Credit Union, what's another one? Digital Federal Credit Union, PenFed Credit Union, and beyond. Now, if you're watching this episode and you're like, okay, you named a couple, but I'm sure there are more. None of those, Marv, let's say none of those are available in my city. None of those are available in my state. Two great resources that you guys can use if you're here watching on the podcast to find banks and credit unions beyond the ones I just talked about are one resource is called bankbranchlocator.com. So that's a really great website to where you can find banks within 1, 5, 10, and 25 miles of whatever city or state that you live in. And another resource is called ibanknet.com. So that one is going to show you banks and credit unions in whatever city or state that you live in to go out and get access to funding. So once you're able to find these respective tier 2 or tier 3 banks, go out and form relationships with them. And then from there, once those relationships are formed, go out and get access to the funding. Now you're in position to maximize how much capital you can get access to. I don't know if it was a lot. I don't know if
I'm not gonna lie. That was great.
Okay.
Like, I'm not sure if you heard I was trying really hard not to be aggressive with it, but I was kind of on my little note section,
hilarious. Okay.
I'm I hope nobody can hear this in the recording. Y'all might hear my fingers typing. I don't know, but I had to write that down, especially because you were even giving us tips on where we should even be going to locate these things and these resources. And I think that a lot of people try to be gatekeepers, and it's but for what? If you're trying to attract people to your brand, try to attract people to your intellect and the knowledge that you want to share, why are you gatekeeping? And I think the good thing about you is there's nothing about you that gives gatekeeper. It gives very much so, listen, yes, I have a business, and yes, it needs to make money. And the only way to make money is through clients. But if I can share anything that exists in here with you all, and maybe you feel like you can do it independently, that's okay too. And you kind of give them the best of both worlds. And I'm really grateful for that. I appreciate that a lot.
1000%.
But what I do want to talk about is this though. So now that we have an idea of the different kinds of banks that we can go to get access to funding for our businesses through credit.
Yep.
And we also know about different ways to use these online resources to track the best approach to doing so. We're getting a lot of clarity on where we need to go to get the credit.
Yep.
And you touched on how we can use this credit for our businesses, for example, paying our employees or whatever else.
Yep.
But is there anything that we shouldn't use our business credit for? I think a lot of people are kind of scared to use their business credit cards because it's am I going to get in trouble if I go to my accountant and they see that I used it for certain things? What should we avoid using it on?
Simple and plain, anything that is not an ordinary or necessary business expense. And I'll explain why. So the reason why, and to your point, I think what happens is a lot of times people who come in with no strategy and no rhyme or reason in the funding space, and they see videos on Instagram of people talking about 25,000 a year and 50,000 a year, they go and get access to the funding. They go and spend it willy-nilly on things that have no relationship or connection to their business or are not a ordinary or necessary business expense. Yeah. The reason why I use that wording in particular is because from a bookkeeping standpoint, if you have a bookkeeper in place, and even if you don't, at the end of the year, tax time is going to come. So those expenses that you want to put on your card, spending, $500 at H&M and $1,000 at, what this store and that store and beyond, buying things that have no connection to your business, when it comes time for tax time to be around, and if you do have a bookkeeper or accountant and they're over here reviewing your finances, I see you sweating already. I see you rubbing your forehead, right? When tax time comes and your accountant is like, okay, well, what's this $500 you spent over here at King's Plaza? All right, hold on. Give me a second. What's this $250 that you spent at Zara? He's like, well, I was just, I was investing in me. I was investing in me. I wasn't invested in the.
You look good, you feel good, and you perform better. So when I'm fly, I'm going to do better in business. So therefore, it's a business expense.
All right. And then now, fast forward 6 months later, the IRS is knocking at your door, and now we're having a different conversation. So we want to remember that we're getting the funding so that we can invest in the business, not in me, the business. Mm-hmm. So simply put, if you're not using the funding you have access to go ahead and take care of expenses that are actually directly connected to the day-to-day operations of your business or an investment you're making into your business, you're playing a very, very dangerous game that's going to come back to bite you in the butt later on. And that's not something I want anybody on this podcast to do.
Amazing answer. And I do wonder though, and I do actually think that there might be an exception that people might not know about. And you tell me if you think this is an exception.
Let's do it.
Once again, getting fly to feel good, to perform well is not the way you should be using your business credit. We are all in alignment there.
1000%.
If you want to be fly, to feel good and perform well, use your own personal Amex card for that one. But is it true though that we can say that investing in you intellectually to do better for your business, that can be an exception. Meaning, specifically, if I am a business owner and I realize that improving my data skills is going to help me in the business, can I expense that purchase for a course online to strengthen my data skills? Can that be put on a business credit card?
1,000%, because
There we
that
go.
technically is an investment into your business, right? So that would be considered you investing into education or training. So to your point, we can even use another example. If there's a mentorship program that costs $5,000 and I'm going to use the information in that mentorship program to invest back into growing my company, then yes, that is an investment into the business, right? It's not a tangible investment. Like I'm not paying for payroll, or I'm not, buying this product that I'm going to resell to my customers, but it is an investment into the education and training that you need as a CEO and you need as a business owner to learn how can I grow this thing better than what I'm doing up until this point. So that's fine. Anything outside of that, or going back to the example, yeah, don't do it. You better not. You best not.
And I think the great thing too is like, okay, once again, like most of us know we should have an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you all are listening to this episode, you should probably now know that you might need a credit specialist, right? But I think the great thing is having two of those are very important, because you're hearing this from Marvin in terms of what you should or probably shouldn't use your business credit card for,
Right.
but also talk to your accountant. Like they can also reaffirm that what he's saying is true, because they're letting you know whether you're making these purchases through your business debit card or your business credit card, they're usually going to advise you on what are tax write-off eligible things anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
that's usually probably what you want to make your purchases through your credit card or your business credit card with, period, right? So have your credit specialist, have your accountant, and I think that having those two things will definitely set you up for success in your business, especially if you know that you cannot come out of pocket for every single thing within the first year, maybe even the first 2 years, but you know you have this team of people who are there to support you in your endeavors to make the money make sense. And for all of us, if there's anything that we need outside of our vision making sense for our businesses, it's to make the money make sense.
Facts.
So having people like Marvin in this world is really important.
I
But
appreciate it.
of course, I want to do like a switcheroo.
Let's do it.
We started off talking about personal credit, making you eligible for business credit,
Yep.
and how do we leverage and maximize business credit in order
Mm-hmm.
to financially support our businesses.
Right.
But there's this like not final step, but a latter step, which is, what does the reverse look like? Now
Okay.
that I know that I have my personal, that it made me eligible to get this, can the latter, meaning can my business credit hurt my personal credit?
Interesting question. So, no, there are, as far as I know to date of this interview, the only way that that can happen, there are two banks that I know that offer business credit products that report on your personal credit. Right. Before I give those banks, let me just take a quick step back. So, when we talk about why business credit is so incredible, one of the best parts about it is that it's completely separate from your personal credit report. So like when it comes to personal credit, let's say you have $100,000 in personal credit cards. That's great. But because your one part of what makes up your personal credit report is your credit utilization, you can only have up to 30% of that reporting on your report, ideally no more than 10, meaning that if you have $100,000 in personal credit, you never really want to spend more than 10 to 30,000 of that on have a report on your report. Otherwise it's going to hurt your personal credit report. On the business credit side, we don't really have to worry about that because there really isn't such a thing as credit utilization hurting your business credit report and beyond. But that's only because business credit cards do not report on your personal report. However, there are certain business credit cards that do. So Capital One, all their business credit card products show on your personal credit report. TD Bank, I think they have one or two business credit cards that show on your personal credit report. And then there's one more bank that I may be missing out on, but those are like the head honchos. Outside of those respective banks, as long as the business credit card product that you're applying for does not show on your personal report, you'll usually never find yourself in a situation where your business credit hurts your personal credit unless you borrow the business credit, let's say whether it's 5,000 going all the way up to 50,000, and you default on that loan. So for example, if you borrow the funding with no rhyme or reason, no plan, no strategy, nothing but a dollar in a dream, you go and use the funding, you lose it or mismanage it, and you burn all the money, and you are not in a position to pay it back on time on a month-to-month basis like you would be for any other funding product, because you probably personally guaranteed to get access to that funding. Remember, what it means to be a personal guarantor for the funding is that in the event you default on the loan, the bank isn't going to come for the business. They come for you. They come for you.
Yeah.
So as a result, now what will happen is if you default on business funding, that's the only other situation to where business credit can hurt your personal credit report. Because now whatever amount that you defaulted on, now it's going to appear on your personal credit report, whether that bank decides to sell it off to a collection account or pursue you personally for it. But now it shows as a delinquent account that's hurting your report and not helping it. not the snap.
Like, hey, but like, mic drop. But no, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think for a lot of people, their fear is okay, I'm starting a new business. I'm trying something new. I believe in myself. My people believe in me. I do not financially have access to resources to support this business on my own.
Mhm.
I need business credit.
Yep.
But I fear that in doing this and pursuing this, it's going to hurt my personal credit, which is also very important to me.
Mhm.
And some people might make a decision and say, I don't even want to touch that because I'm fearful of what it might do to my personal credit. And in my opinion, and also based off what you just said, no, they should go after it. They should chase it. If they know they need it and their why makes sense,
Yep.
don't fear it. Just go for it.
Yep.
So I'm happy you gave that breakdown. But there's something else I want to add to that too.
Let's do it.
Okay. So once again, giving everybody the timeline. We talked about personal credit, making you eligible for business credit.
Yes, ma'am.
We spoke about the power of business credit and what it can do for you in terms of your expenses, in terms of carrying your business, and etc.
Yep.
We got into the nitty-gritty of the different places that you can go to get the business credit. And then we also just spoke about the fact that, unless something new is coming up and we don't know about it, our specialists don't know about it, for the most part, business credit shouldn't impact your personal credit.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question to you is more sentimental now.
Yep.
For a person who's just, they know they have this idea, they know it's time to go for it, but they also realize I just don't have the money for it, and they feel insecure about everything. They heard all of this, and they still feel scared to pursue that business credit. What do you have to tell that person to encourage them? Take the bet on yourself and go get the business credit card. It will help you.
So it's super duper funny. I'm actually happy you said that. I'm gonna go the opposite route.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna go the opposite route. I'm gonna be a little controversial. I'm gonna say a hot take that most people won't agree with, but I actually just said it the other day, and I feel so strongly about this. Personally, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, especially if you're new to the world of business, I don't think that you should be taking the chance on getting access to funding until you first have some skin in the game. So what I mean by skin in the game is most people who are getting ready to start investing to start their first business, they're still working a 9 to 5, right? And by the way, nothing wrong with a 9 to 5, nothing wrong with a career. All of that is fantastic. But before you go out and you take, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 50,000 in funding, I'm a proponent of you taking a portion of whatever that income is. I don't care if you're making $2,000 a month from your 9 to 5, 3,000, 4,000, whatever it may be, putting that to the side and using that to start investing in your business. And the reason why I say that, and once again, this doesn't apply to all entrepreneurs, or all aspiring, entrepreneurs. This just applies to some. But the reason why I say that is because the reality of becoming a business owner that a lot of people don't want to talk about is that, bro, it's just hard. It's extremely difficult, and most businesses fail. Most business owners fail, and they don't just fail once, they fail over and over and over and over again. And the reason why I personally, for most, not all, I can't stress this enough, aspiring entrepreneurs would recommend for them to first and foremost use whatever money they're getting from their 9 to 5 to start and fund their business is because the reality of the fact that your business is more likely to fail than it is to succeed is real. The statistics are there to prove it. Now, and then moreover, going back to what I said about just entrepreneurship as a whole, because you haven't even experienced the reality of what it is to truly be a business owner yet to see if you even really want this. The late nights, the early mornings, the uncertainty about when and where your next dollar is going to come from, how you're going to cover payroll, all these other different things. Like not what you see on Instagram about Stripe deposits and just made 100,000 today. No. I'm talking about what it really takes to run a business. And as a result of that, I would much rather I don't care if it's an idea that, oh my gosh, Marvin, this idea here, awesome. You have a 9 to 5, great. If you're making 5,000, whatever you're comfortable putting aside, start putting that aside and using that to invest in your business to see if you really want to do this. And then from there, once your business has either A, started to get some traction, or B, you have skin in the game and you've taken enough lumps, bumps, and bruises to where you're like, you know what? I think I know what this is going to require of me. I'm ready to make that sacrifice. I'm ready to make that commitment. For most people, not all, then is when you could start considering to use business funding. Outside of that, there are a lot of people that, just because you feel good, doesn't necessarily mean that you just jump and get access to the funding. Because at the end of the day, the one thing that's guaranteed, whether the business thrives or dies, is that you have to pay that money back.
But
And,
you
and
have to do it.
most people don't want to talk about that. And I understand that as me being the funding guy, I'm supposed to make it seem like it's all glitz and glamour. But I know people that have found themselves $100,000 in the hole and almost considered having to move out the country because they did not know how they was going to pay it back. We don't talk about that. We only want to show the screenshots of the Chase statement. Oh man, Chase just gave me 50 and this bank just but we don't talk about the other side of it. Like I know people who have taken real losses because they went, funding crazy with no a matter of fact, they did have a strategy, they did have a plan, and the business still failed.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to be negative. I'm just saying that to talk about the other side of things that people don't want to talk about. Because the last thing I want is for somebody to come back to Juju or come back to me and be like, I thought you told me. Oh no. Oh no. I told you both sides. I told you both sides.
Yes.
So once again, this doesn't apply for all because there are going to be some people that, especially if you're trying to do something like a brick and mortar, who do start from ground zero and do get access, do start using the funding before, they use whatever money they're getting from their 9 to 5, whatever it may be, that do all and have success. But for most people, the reality is it's just not going to work that way. So I would feel a lot more confident telling somebody to get their own skin in the game first, get their feet wet, and then from there we could revisit the conversation of funding. I know it's not the answer everybody wants to hear, but that's just my truth. That's just my truth. I'm just speaking to my truth. So yeah.
But I think that's very important, right? Because I think to your point, people who are in your space, and I see very often, right? They're only glorifying the good of getting access to the business credit, but they're not glorifying the truth. I want to say the bad, the truth of what it means to have access to business credit and the fact that someone does have to pay that back. Yes, we did mention during this call, or excuse me, this interview, that it doesn't maybe hurt your personal credit, but there is an expectation that financially and with cash and debit, that you do have to pay this money back in some way or form. And if you do not plan on having to escape the country and get plastic surgery to avoid having to pay the government and these banks and et cetera back their money, you should definitely be more responsible when you're making the decision on if you indeed need this. I'll even use me for an example before we start wrapping this up, but my first business is not Hugh Capital. My first business is actually something called Vision. And I started it back in 2018. And it was honestly just events. And I was also working a job. And I was also exposed to the fact that I could pursue getting a business credit card just to start building up my business credit line. But at the time when I started it, it was it's technically my first time with as an entrepreneur with an LLC. But I was throwing parties and making money as an entrepreneur during college. That's my other life, right? But I said no to the business credit card because I said this is my first time formally building something, and I want to make sure I'm financially responsible with what I'm doing as a business owner. But number two, how long is this business even going to exist for, and am I even doing it right? And the reality is, even though I started it in 2018 and it was going very well, I shut it down in 2020 because all of our events were in person. COVID said there is no more in person, and we started doing virtual experiences. And although people did enjoy them, as a owner of a business, I just feel like I could deliver something so much more and better than what I was doing. And I had ideas for what a pivot could look like, but I just didn't fancy those ideas. And I felt like it was time to just shut it down, take time off, get my personal career in better alignment. And then when I figure it out, I could try something new, and hopefully that is better. And when I realized that Hugh Capital will be a way of us kind of, I guess, redoing what we did through Vision, but this time not only through events, through tech, I had to realize, wait a minute, to build tech that scales and grows, people usually get access to something called venture capital. But a sad reality, I don't say bad, but this one actually is bad, but Black people only get less than 2% of venture capital. And if most people who are building, aka white males or whoever else, are building technical products, and they usually get money earlier on in their ventures through VC money, but I, as a Black woman, have a very small chance of getting that, I have to realize two things. One, I'm not wrong for thinking I need money to build, because they all had to get money in order for them to build, because either their 9 to 5 couldn't afford paying their day-to-day bills and funding that business, or two, there is no friends and family to like really give you at least enough for you to build this from scratch. So I had to realize for myself that in order for me to build a proper foundation for my business, I can't afford to, well, one, I actually had to quit my job to start building a proper foundation for Hugh Capital. I plan on going back, but I needed a break, which means I'm living off my savings. I couldn't live off my savings and build with my savings. So the only other way outside of my personal money and VC money to fund this business was through business credit. And
Right.
that's when I knew that it was time to actually use it, because everything about my personal finances and the fact that there is a gap in accessibility to
Mm-hmm.
additional funding outside of business credit led me here.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that helps anybody else in terms of hearing what Marvin had to say about failing first to have a better idea of your vision for your company and why you really need
Mm-hmm.
something like business credit, because that was the reason why I ultimately needed to use it. So I know I gave you guys a kind of small glimpse into when slash why I used it earlier on, but I didn't give
Mm-hmm.
you the full context. And that's the actual truth as to why. So hopefully that does something for someone. But while
Right.
that's my truth, before we wrap this up, Marvin, I want to
Talk to
know
me.
your truth, which is you've done the career pivoting thing,
Mm-hmm.
you do the credit specialist work, and
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have your media company,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
you know the pros and cons of this industry.
Yep.
What was a very necessary decision
Ha ha
that
ha ha ha.
you've had to make in your career in order to do what it is that you're doing to this extent?
What is a very necessary decision I had to make in my career? Ah, okay. Wow. I would say moving out. I would say moving
Mm,
out of my folks' house. That was very, very important. It's actually two pronged. One, it was moving out, but then also I had to stop working with my father in his business, right? So to kind of give the full synopsis, right before I had started this business, so I talked about like how for 3 years, like I was, or for several years, I was in the entertainment space before COVID happened. During that time as well, I was also working with my father in a hardware store that he had actually in Canarsie, and we were working together from 2017 to 2020. So for those 4 years, and going into 2020, when I ultimately made the decision to take a step away from stand up and go all in on business, and then later that year, I started my credit consulting firm. And then fast forward a year later, the business started to take off. I had a very tough decision to make in that moment. I felt like I was at a fork in the road where I was like, all right, cool. Am I going to continue to work with my dad in this hardware store that wasn't really doing all that well, to kind of just call it what it is? Like we were putting in late nights, early mornings, 10, 12, 14-hour days, and the business was not bearing fruit. Or am I going to look at this credit consulting firm that I've just started, this media platform that I'm building, that I have people ranting and raving in the comments like, oh my goodness, give me more information, and go all in on that? Because I knew I couldn't do both. And ultimately, I decided to choose the latter. And that was a very, very tough time because, as the first one, I didn't want to disappoint my father, but I had to be really honest with myself and say, okay, cool. What do I need to do to get to where I know I'm going to land in the next 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5+ years? And if what I'm doing now doesn't align with that, I got to cut it off, no matter who it may hurt or what it may be connected to. And
mm,
unfortunately, that was a byproduct of me having to separate from my father's business, and that was a very uncomfortable conversation. That was a very uncomfortable season,
yeah.
right? And as things progressed, the business continued to grow, and it kind of just got to a point where the next phase after that was me moving out, because I kind of just got to a point where, all right, I'm all in and I'm focused on this business that I'm growing in the credit and finance space, but I need to be in an environment that's going to force me to grow. I need
Hmm.
to be in a situation that's going to make me uncomfortable, that's going to make me a little anxious, that's going to make me a little nervous every single day that I wake up, because I know I have to wake up every single day and bet on me. And I
Yeah.
knew that wasn't going to happen for me kicking my feet up in my mother's house, right? Not having to worry about anything but just wake up, run my business, go to sleep. And that was when I made the next uncomfortable decision of moving out, which was also very difficult, right? Because at the time I really didn't know all that much. I thought I knew. I didn't really know that much about managing personal finances and, just balancing entrepreneurship and just some of the personal things that would happen in my life for the coming years. But that was one of the most important decisions that I've made to date, because when I think of everything that I've done now, there's no way I would have did it if I stayed home. There's no way I would have did it if I was still working with my dad. And what I would say in regards to that is, like, for anyone that's watching this, because I think that there are a lot of people who's watching this episode that also either maybe going through that season or they're getting ready to go into that season, but they're like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they're nervous. You can either deal with short-term discomfort or ultimately deal with long-term dysfunction.
Yeah.
You're going to make a decision one way or another.
Yep.
And that short-term discomfort for me was those 6 to 12 months that I had to go through of like, my dad kind of looking at me sideways, like, how could you leave me to go, work in this other business?
Yeah.
Once again, you're Dominican, I'm Haitian. I don't know if it's the same way you guys culture, but in my culture, like you don't leave the house until you're married and you got like 2 kids
Yeah, I'm
on the
not
way.
gonna lie. They don't really force you out like that. I was talking to my dad about that. Like, I moved out because I kind of felt like I needed to because I'm a young woman living
Right,
with my father. My father's a man. He don't want no big old men in his house dating his daughter.
right,
So I needed space. But other
right.
than that, I could have stayed there forever if I needed to.
Haitian parents are the exact same. I could have been 40, pushing 4 kids, married for 10 years. My parents would have been like, "Oh, welcome home, my son. I love you so much." And that was not a life that I was like, no,
Yeah,
I needed to be in my own space. I needed to have that sense of responsibility and that push. Otherwise, I wouldn't have went as hard in my business as I went then, and I still am going now. Like it's just a reality. So I had to go through that period of short-term discomfort, but man, what an investment it was. And I still vividly remember. I don't want to get too into it. I remember the day, it was like the last day that I had to sign the lease for me to move out my parents' crib and go in. I remember I was like shaking, looking at the DocuSign, like, yo, am I really about to do this? Am I really about to do this? Like,
yeah,
nah, maybe I should push this off another year. But if I didn't take that step, me
yeah,
and you wouldn't be on this call right now. I'd be in Home Depot right now moving some sheetrock
yeah.
on the way
Pretty much
back to the
right.
hardware store. Like that's just what it is. But
Yeah,
I'm in a situation now where because I took that leap, I've been able to impact 3.2 million people and counting with the information that they need to start and scale profitable businesses by way of business funding. But
yep,
I had to go through the short-term discomfort, right?
mhm,
So that was a decision that I had to make, a very necessary decision that I
yep.
had to make to get to where I'm at now. And man, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I appreciate it.
No, honestly, that was a perfect way to end. That was really helpful, very insightful. And
Right.
everyone who's listening, right? I think that the reality is, although I'm bringing people on this podcast to basically educate you on a skill that I think you need to take seriously or educate you on resources that I think you should use, I
Mhm.
think that I'm also exposing you to people who you can honestly be inspired by because everybody has a unique story. Everybody has a unique struggle. I forgot who I was talking to the other day, but I think that some people think that unless like you're broke, like you have like $0 to your name, that's the only struggle you could possibly have. But
Right.
life has so many
Right.
other things to give us to deal with other than just like being broke versus rich. Like we
Right.
have a lot of key decisions that we need to make in order
Yep.
for us to adult, in order
Yep.
for us to grow and evolve, and in order for us to be the kind of person that we think we need to be good in this world
Right.
or at least impactful in this world. And I
Mhm.
feel like people like Marvin, even breaking down what his very necessary decision was, it just goes to show you that some of us need to shake a little bit in
Yep.
order for us to be the person that we want to be, the entrepreneur that we need to be. And I hope that inspired you all. I love that answer that you gave.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any final words for people who are listening before you go?
Final words. Final words. Well, first and foremost, I want to use this moment to highlight you. You and I have known
Oh,
each other for a little bit of time now by way of like mutual friends, and I've watched you from afar. And what you're doing with U Capital is it's remarkable. Like it's very inspiring for me to see. I love seeing women of color that are just go-getters, and you are definitely one of the biggest ones that I know. You're very focused, you're very driven, and it's very inspirational for me to see what you're building, how many lives that you've impacted up until this point, and I'm excited to see what the next 5 to 10 plus years look like for you Capital and everything else you have going on. So definitely wanted to make sure I highlighted you there. Anything else I would talk about for anyone that has watched this? If you received any value from it and you, of course, want to stay connected to me, I have nothing to sell you. You could just go follow me on social media at Marvin Francois double underscore. Follow me on YouTube where I provide all free value information at Marvin Francois. And any questions that you have that I didn't answer on here that you would love to ask in relation to personal funding, business funding, and even getting your credit restored, please, I'd be more than welcome. I'd be more than happy, to go ahead and
yeah.
answer those questions for you. But that's pretty much it. And I guess one closing word, I guess I'll say to kind of start to wrap us up, and I think this will also help people too. Also, with this season I'm in right now, I don't know who this is going to help, but this is going to help somebody. Always remember that whenever you say yes to something, you're going to say no to something else.
Yeah.
Always, whether you know what that thing is or not. So in this season of business that I'm in right now, it's required for me to hyper focus on very specific things that have ultimately forced me to say no to a lot of things that seem really great, but that just don't align with where I'm headed over the course of these next 5 to 10 plus years. And along the way of you doing that, you're going to have people who don't understand,
Yeah.
people who are uncomfortable, people that may just stop talking to you altogether, and doors that you may seem like are being closed. But
Yeah.
ultimately, what happens is a lot of time people find themselves saying yes to everything that falls along their path, And in the long term, they find themselves running on a treadmill and being in the same spot that they were 5 years ago because they didn't just lock in on that one thing that they really, really wanted. I'm trying to do something very, very special with TakeOff Financial, which is my company. And that's to impact and provide as much value as I can to early stage entrepreneurs who are trying to build real businesses. And I can't say yes to everything if I'm trying to do that, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I understand that 5 to 10 years from now, I'll look back on the things I said no to and be happy that I did. So for anyone who's watching this, whether you're in the beginning stages of your entrepreneurial journey, you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, or you've been in the entrepreneurship world for some time, always remember you can never say yes to everything, because when you say yes to something, you're always saying no to something else. And more often than not, you definitely want to make sure that thing you're saying no to isn't the thing you actually want. That's all.
That was amazing. If you all haven't learned anything from this episode at all, I can't say it was him. It has to be you. On that note, I'm so silly. But anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. As Marvin had mentioned, there are different ways for you to follow him. Per usual, it'll all be listed in the description below, whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Like, please do take the time to tune into his content. He dropped gems here, but we only have an hour with each other. He can't tell you everything here. He has a lot more to share through his platforms and his community. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And Marvin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
See you, everybody. Bye.